Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Joe Giansante, Senior Associate Athletic Director for External Communications in the UO Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. We're on location at PK Park today, where the newly reinstated UO baseball team practices and plays. Joe will be talking to us about the baseball program at the University of Oregon, its history and its future. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to be here today.
Well, we're really excited to be here. This is great on such a beautiful sunny day, especially.
Yeah, nice to get out of the studio. Home field here on the ball field. Nothing better than a ball field going on, and nice sunny day.
Yeah, we've got the cracks of the bats for batting practice behind us.
Yeah, of course, in college baseball, that could be a ting, you know, as we're learning now in our very first season. But yeah, it's been tremendous, and we're just starting out here. We just got the field in. We got much more to go.
I've got lots of questions for you about where it's at now and where it's going, but I wanted to start with a history of baseball at U of O. It was on hiatus between 1981, when it got canceled for budgetary reasons, along with men's gymnastics, I think, and women's soccer and golf.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, some swimming as well. Yeah,
and some swimming, and then picked up again in 2008. But there was a long history for baseball at U of O before it got canceled in '81, right?
Yeah, that's one of the stories we've been really trying to tell with people, is that Oregon had a long, proud tradition and history in baseball. We've had 13 postseason appearances. We've been to Omaha before at the College World Series in 1954. We had legendary coaches with Mel Krause and Don Kirsch, 25 straight winning seasons. And in fact, the very first sporting event in the history of the University of Oregon was a baseball game. They organized a ball game out by Dede Hall in 1877. Just after the university was established, and they played a baseball game against what now we know as Western Oregon University. At that point, it was known as Monmouth College, and the Ducks that day, known as the Webfoots, gave up 13 runs in the first inning to Monmouth College, and they canceled baseball for another 13 years. So fortunately, that didn't happen this season, as we beat the defending national champions in our very first game here at PK Park. But yes, there's a long tradition and history in it.
So when they weren't playing outside of Dede Hall, where did they actually play? Where was the first field?
There were many fields. They played there for many years. Then they moved a little bit further towards where Howe Field is today, but a little bit more where you might find behind Johnson Hall, where the Museum of Art is. They played some games there. Then they finally moved over to Howe Field, and there's another great story with Howe Field. There was a donation for Howe Field of $10,000 to build the ball field for the baseball team to play. It's amazing now, as we get ready to spend $18.5 million on our ballpark, that an entire ball stadium could be built for $10,000. But the gift was given, a $10,000 gift, and the person who gave the gift wanted to remain anonymous. And so in the great tradition of naming facilities and stadiums after the person who gave the gift, they actually named it Anonymous Field. And it was named Anonymous Field for many, many years until it got changed to Howe Field.
That's a great story. I didn't know that one. I did read, though, that there was even a form of indoor baseball played for a while. Can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, with the weather here in Oregon, there have been all kinds of, you know, efforts to go indoors. They've played in Gerlinger. They, back in the days, they had batting cages under Hayward Field. You know, Bill Bowerman was a great fan of baseball, and he used to be involved in it. And Bill Hayward, in fact, was as well, who was involved with track.
Hayward of Hayward Field.
Hayward Field. And the legend is, from some of the old-time baseball guys, is that Bill Hayward was actually the anonymous gift, because he liked track and baseball living together, and that Bill Hayward actually gave the gift, but he wanted to remain anonymous because, you know, he was the track coach. So some great legends and stories, but they shared facilities a lot, and they went indoors and you know, had batting cages and played ball under the West Grandstand there at Hayward Field.
I got to say that I don't quite understand how you can hit a long ball if you're playing indoors.
Yeah, well, there's nets and, you know, walls, and it's a little bit like being a kid when you're playing wiffle ball and you hit the ball. If you hit that wall, then this ceiling, it's a double, and, you know, all that stuff. It's just a baseball thing.
So you got to play the angles.
Yeah, that's right. I play the angles. A little bit like hockey, yeah.
There's some wonderful old photographs of former teams, and one of them actually shows a women's baseball team. Do you know about the women's history in the sport?
Well, I know that you know, during the war years, with as documented by A League of Their Own, there was a lot of great interest in women's baseball at that point, and I imagine that there were, you know, groups that were put together for a lot of fun games that were played over the years. I know that the beginnings of what our softball program is today started with that. So yeah, it's just one of those. I mean, it's America. Right? I mean, you got to have baseball, you got to have apple pie. I mean, it's just, you know, hot dogs and popcorn. It's baseball, and we see it all throughout our history, and certainly the University of Oregon was a big part of that.
Yeah, I think the photograph I saw was from 1917 of the women playing, and they had these really elegant bloomers on that provided great coverage, but still allowed them to run those bases.
That's great, that's great.
Now, in the heyday of UO baseball, until of course we get the new heyday coming along, Don Kirsch was coach. That guy's quite a legend. Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Don Kirsch was to baseball players, he was a lot like Len Casanova was to football players. He talked about integrity and character and representing your university. All those things were very, very important to Don Kirsch. And he's, you know, the one legacy that he leaves and that Kaz left, but all the players that played for Don Kirsch went out and they became coaches and educators, and they worked at high schools throughout the state. One of them being Mel Krause, who from Lincoln High School in Portland, he coached at Sheldon High School. He coached basketball, baseball, but it was the ideal that he put in his players that went out and then taught more and more people. So even a guy like me sitting here today talking with you has something of Don Kirsch in him, because my high school baseball coach was named Ken Bond, and he played for Don Kirsch. And so when my high school baseball coach was teaching me about integrity and character and the way this game is played, those are things I've carried forward all my life, and you'll see a lot of that in this ball field today. So the legacy that they leave is beyond, you know, just winning and losing and that sort of thing. It's in the people, it's in the education, it's in all of us today that have learned life lessons from his teachings when he was a baseball coach.
He was coach for 22 years, and the team had a pretty remarkable record during those years, right?
Yeah, they were very good, yeah. People always forget, because Oregon State won 2 national championships, that Oregon really had the preeminent baseball program in the state. And as I mentioned, a College World Series appearance in Omaha in 1954. And that was a big deal. You know, the Ducks went down and beat USC and got to Omaha, and we've had 5 All-Americans in baseball, and this very year, we're going to have our first baseball player inducted in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. That's Joe Gordon. He was a little bit before Don Kirsch's time, but you know, some of those stories are great, and certainly the team has had great success until the program was dropped in 1981.
When Kirsch was appointed head coach, he was only 25 years old. Was that unusual for the day?
I don't think so. I think, you know, in those days, there were player coaches at a lot of places. Even Major League Baseball teams in those days had player coaches. So there were some times when, you know, there was a guy that would be 35 years old, he'd still be the second baseman and he'd be the coach. You know, even as recent as Pete Rose, who at one point was a player manager for the Cincinnati Reds. And so, you know, that was just part of baseball in the old days, and so it wasn't unusual to have a young person be the coach.
I wanted to get back to Howe Field. You talked about it a little bit. The team played there until the sport was canceled for budgetary reasons in '81. When was that field actually built, and why aren't we playing on it now? Good
question. The field was built right after Matt Court was built in the early 1930s. So Matt Court came in 1927, and then the baseball field was built after that. The first coach on that baseball field was Howard Hobson, who we also know now as the championship coach for the Tall Furs, the NCAA basketball tournament in 1939. Well, before he won a national championship as a basketball coach, he was the baseball coach at Howe Field. And so this history is just all intertwined in the University of Oregon lore. I think that Howe Field served its purpose for many, many years, and it created a great experience for students who would walk by after classes and they'd come in and watch the games. But as we looked at Howe Field and you know, what it was then and what it possibly could be today, number one, the softball team plays there now. Number two, there are many problems with that as far as creating a baseball experience that would help us generate revenue, which is one of the promises Mr. Kilkenny gave to Mr. Frohmeyer when we decided to bring baseball back, that we needed to generate revenue and really try to operate this baseball team almost like a minor league baseball franchise. So concessions and parking and merchandising and licensing and radio and TV, all those things that help a baseball program be successful financially really didn't have a chance to work well at Howe Field. So the other part of that too, you know, we looked around at sites and fans, and times have changed. You know, we have just as many students living right behind us here at these apartments on MLK as we have living in the dorms on campus. And back in those days, this was just a bean field pretty much back in the early 60s. And matter of fact, when we dug up for those light structures out there, we found some remnants of what was a farm here. So, you know, so times change, things get bigger. the difference of college baseball today as opposed to then is much different, and for us to be competitive and go out and try to beat the Beavers and be competitive in the Pac-10, that we needed a ball field that would allow us to do that.
Well, you answered a lot of my next question, which is why in a time of economic hardship, when a lot of big sports programs are having to cut back on their sports, why it makes sense to reinstitute baseball. But you did mention that there's a resurgence nationally of interest in baseball as well as just here, right?
Yeah, really. In college baseball, ESPN has done a tremendous job of growing the sport of college baseball. And I think it's been led, ironically, by the minor league franchises around the country. There are about 140 minor league baseball franchises. Every single one of them made money. And I think that kind of led the way that, okay, the sport of baseball can be successful, and it really forced universities to think about their baseball programs in different ways and to start to contemplate whether or not baseball could become the third revenue-producing sport at most universities.
That is after football and basketball, right?
Football and basketball. So looking for another sport that can generate some revenue, or at least pay for itself, and then also meet the interests and abilities of student athletes that are coming through the high school ranks. But at the time when Oregon didn't have baseball and when we did reinstate it, there were only 4 other BCS conference schools that did not have baseball. So what Oregon did wasn't necessarily out of the norm. It was just what we felt correcting a mistake that had been made in 1981, because it's kind of standard operating procedure to have a baseball program at a major university athletic department. So, it's the analogy I always said, it's like, if you don't have it, it's like having 9 toes. It doesn't really, there's not you can still walk around and everything, but you don't have 10 toes. And having baseball really completes the whole picture.
I like that analogy. But I suppose we can also thank the M's here in town and the OSU team for really generating a lot of interest locally in baseball.
Eugene is a great baseball town. I think that in our studies and as we researched baseball, how many crowds the M's draw, over 5,000, significant. Their average attendance. Oregon State success, meaning that you can be in this weather condition in the spring and have success and win. And this very year, we saw Oregon State win 2 championships. This very year in the Pac-10 Conference, Washington State is 2nd, Washington is in 3rd, and Oregon State's in 4th. In the Northwest, you can win, and so we learned a lot about baseball players and where they're coming from. And I dare say it might be an infusion of all these California families that have moved up in the last 10 years. They didn't just move up, and retire. They moved up with sons and daughters and people that grew up playing baseball, and now those kids are going to Oregon high schools and playing baseball here. And so the level of play has gotten a lot better. And it is a great baseball town. I mean, the M's were a AAA affiliate of the Phillies. It was this was an area that you'd see, Mike Schmidt come through, and some of the legends of the game would come and play at Old Civic Stadium over there. So, this is a great baseball town, and it was just a shame that we weren't a part of it.
Tell us a little bit more about this particular park. This is the first phase of development, right? What else is going to happen, and what features are you going to have here? Yeah,
well, really, what you see behind us now is just the first phase, and it was just the field. We had such a tight timeline to work on that we didn't have the time to go ahead and build a stadium. We had about 9 months to get ready to play baseball, and the University of Oregon was the only university in those BCS conference schools to not have a baseball field on our campus. We had 8 soccer fields, but not a single baseball field. And so we didn't even have anywhere for our team to practice. So there was a need to work very fast to get a field in place, and that precipitated some of the siting of the ballpark, and having to work through some of the zoning requirements and make sure that we were being good neighbors and mindful about our parks and open space and of where we could put the ballpark. And so once we made that decision, we went ahead and got the field in. Next year, where we're sitting now, will be part of the main stadium. There'll be a roof. We'll want to let people get covered when the weather's not great. There'll be a wide open concourse where people can walk around and visit with their friends but still see the game. You'll be able to buy food or hot dogs or soda pop or whatever while you're on the concourse, and the game will still be going on right there. You'll be able to see it. So many ballparks, when you want to buy something to eat, you have to leave the game and go back behind the stadium and buy stuff. But what we thought is the experience of kind of having this community walk, if you will, during a baseball game was really important to the experience that people had and generating the revenue that we need to support the team. So it'll be 13 sections of 14 rows, all nice green chairback seats, about 3,000 chairback seats and about 500 bleachers. And then we'll have areas down each line that'll be more like party areas. So open spaces, landscaping, picnic tables, things like that people, when they want to come with their families and get a hot dog or a soda, they can just sit down there on the baseline and enjoy a ball game that way.
I like that idea. It means you don't have to wait to the 7th inning stretch to go get your hot dog.
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, if you want, you can go get one and stand up there and watch the game, or maybe a rain shower comes through and you want to get out of the rain, you can go stand there for a little while and then come back down to your seat. And we're working on some things like heaters and various other things that would allow us to have it. And then above that concourse level, there'll be a suite level. We'll have 8 suites and then a full press box, and those suites will help us generate the revenue we need to support the program.
Well, we wouldn't have a program without a coach. So
Right.
Tell me a little bit about George Horton, please.
George is a phenomenal person. I think that the fact that someone like that would take a leap of faith to come to Oregon to start our baseball program, I think maybe hasn't received as much play in the media as maybe it should have, just from a story perspective. For example, if you go out and buy the We Are Marshall DVD, one of their special features is on legendary coaches. And on that DVD, the legendary coaches are John Wooden, Bobby Bowden of Florida State, Pat Summitt of Tennessee women's basketball, and George Horton of Cal State Fullerton baseball. He is a legendary coach. It would be like hiring Mike Krzyzewski for our basketball program. We're incredibly lucky to have someone of his caliber here to teach our kids and to coach our baseball team and lead this program. It's been challenging because he's never had a losing season until this year. We all knew that was coming because it's a brand new program and a first year with a bunch of freshmen on our baseball team. But we have every confidence in the world that he is going to provide us with some incredible moments and help this team get to Omaha.
So given his profile, why would Mr. Horton want to come and start from scratch and build from the ground up? We
talk about that a lot. I think that, when you challenge yourself, when the human endeavor gets challenged, the harder the challenge, the greater the reward. It's one thing if you take over a team that just won the championship the year before and then you win the championship next year. You've just maintained what was already there. To take something completely from scratch, where we did not own a baseball in our athletic department, all of our old baseball trophies had been thrown in the garbage. We had nothing. When you go from nothing to Omaha or to a championship in the Pac-10 Conference, that reward is much, much greater on an individual basis. And I think that the challenge to do something that he would have his own legacy with was very appealing to Coach Horton, who, of course, took over for the legendary Augie Garrido at Cal State Fullerton. So I think that challenge, more than anything, was what brought him here.
I've heard it said that he's a man of relatively few words. How would you characterize his style?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think that's, I'm sure that's tongue-in-cheek. George will have, it's not uncommon for Coach Horton to have 30-minute meetings after every single practice, after every single game. I can't tell you how many games I've been at this year on the road where they've turned out the lights, all the people are ready to go, the press box is shut, the buses and cars are all gone, and the Oregon baseball team is still out in the corner of the field being talked to by George Horton. These kids aren't just being taught baseball, they're being educated. And if you want to look at it in a certain way, it's like they play their baseball game and then they go to class. Because George, when he talks to them after games and during or after practices, he's not talking about X's and O's. He's talking about integrity, work ethic, discipline, all the things that make people successful in life. And so he is an absolute educator, and I think it's one of the things that is his great strength and why we're very fortunate to have him here at Oregon.
How do you recruit for a new team, especially when there are really serious competitors just up the road?
Yeah, it's tough. One thing that we've learned is there are a lot of great baseball players. In the research leading up to the program that we presented to Mr. Kilkenny, we found that 85% of the players that were on Oregon State's first national championship team were from the state of Oregon. That gave us confidence that we knew that there were good players in the local area and around the state, and places that, there were more players out there than could fit on the Division I baseball teams. So we knew there were players available, and I think that Coach's reputation was a big part of it. Everybody in Southern California, everybody in college baseball, all high school baseball players know who George Horton is. Maybe for you and I, it's like, knowing who Katie Couric is, or, knowing who, Edward R. Murrow is. We all know who they are, and that's kind of the way it is for these baseball players. They all know who George Horton is, so he opens up all those doors. And the first recruiting class, I think I love what they did. When they brought him to campus, they brought 15 kids in, and the very first thing they did, they didn't bring them to our incredible facilities here at Autzen or the training room or what we have over here. The first thing they did is they took them to 13th Avenue and walked straight down campus in front of Johnson Hall and said, this is what a university is like, and if you come to Oregon, you're going to have an incredible college experience. Because some of the teams that we're recruiting against, like Cal State Fullerton or UC Irvine or some of the other commuter schools that are good at baseball, this experience of going to the University of Oregon is different. And so parents of baseball players, the baseball players themselves, having that college experience was important. And of those first 15 kids that they approached that way, 13 of them signed and are here behind us right now and make up what was the #2 ranked recruiting class in the nation last year. So the university sold it, is what sold it.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Now, given Coach Horton's priorities for the team and given the sort of growing culture of making sure that student athletes actually do get that education at the same time as they get really significant sports experience, what about the facilities that help these guys keep up with their courses and maintain a good average and actually graduate in good time?
Yeah, being student athletes, of course, they're afforded a lot of help. And one of the challenges that they face is time management. Last night we played in Salem against the Beavers. The night before we played in Corvallis against Oregon State. Over the weekend we were in Tempe playing Arizona State. So academic personnel travel with them to each of these games. They take tests on the road. They receive academic advising and counseling at really whenever they need it. The Academic Learning Center that's being built on campus right now across from Oregon Hall will be a place for them to enhance their educational experience. So a lot of effort goes into making sure that these kids get the education that they came here to get, and also given the challenges they have of being Division I major college baseball players, when they have to travel and be gone so much. There's a tough balance there. In the past, the baseball academic progress report had been dismal at all colleges around the country, but significant progress has been made by shortening the season down, trying to restrict travel a little bit, play more regional games, and give them greater academic support. It's been better and it's gone up. And this baseball team, right out of the gate, had one of our best GPAs as a team in the athletic department. So we're this
current year.
Yeah, this current year. So we're real proud of these kids so far for picking it up right away and getting their work done.
Let me back up just a second. You said that in previous incarnations of UO baseball, the academic success was not great. Was it harder in baseball than it was in football or basketball,
well,
say?
I think so, and I think it wasn't just Oregon. I mean, it was across the board. I would say in the last 20 years across the board in the sport of college baseball. There are several challenges in baseball that have had to be overcome. One of those being that most kids are drafted out of high school. So when you have kids that are drafted out of high school, a lot of those kids will leave and go play Major League Baseball, and then there are times when now when they're a junior they can be drafted. So you have a lot of kids who, let's say you're drafted in the first round and you're offered $5 million to go be a pitcher for the Yankees, you probably don't finish your education, and so that affects the academic progress rate. And I think universities are doing a better job making sure that when people do leave, that they come back and get their education and get their degrees, and that when they're on campus, that they attend summer school and they take a harder or a larger class load and accelerate their learning so they can make sure to get their degree in while they're here at the University of Oregon before they go off and, like Jacoby Ellsbury and steal home base for the Boston Red Sox. So there are a lot of challenges that baseball faces that other sports don't face.
So are there a lot of players who play out their years of eligibility on a campus team and then get drafted into the majors?
There are some, yeah, there are some. I think that one thing you'll see, the old coach adage is that if you see a senior starter in baseball, maybe he's not that good, which I don't think that's true. I think that a lot of times there are kids who just want to get their education, and their dream is not to just be a professional baseball player. I mean, their dream is to be a well-rounded individual that goes and has success in all facets of life. And so this year in the Pac-10 Conference, I would say about half of the starters in the league are seniors, and those kids will get drafted and they'll go ahead and go. If you get drafted after your junior year, you have to make a decision right there and go. Or excuse me, after your sophomore year, you get drafted. And so when you decide not to go, then you have to stay for your junior and senior years. So you got one chance to go. If not, then you got to stay in.
I see. Okay, so that explains the relatively high proportion of senior starters.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Yeah, imagine in the Pac-10 conference this year, give you an idea how young our team is, there are only 2 senior position starters. There are many senior pitchers that are out there, but as far as starters go, you know, excuse me, I should say there are only 2 freshman starters at third base for Washington and center field for California that are freshmen. We have 7 freshmen starting. That's how young we are, and so those other teams have a lot of experience. They have juniors, they have seniors working up and down the lineup, and that makes a big difference.
I guess that leads me back to my last question, which is the whole notion of the first season is bound to be hard. It's quite likely to be a losing season, and I can see that the coaching staff and the administrators know that. They've got the perspective to deal with it. Must be a little bit hard on the players.
It is tough on them. I think that we all try to help manage their expectations, because when kids come in, they're full of bravado. You know, they've been the best athlete at their high schools. They were the high school quarterback. They were the prom king. They were the pitcher on the baseball team, and they won everything, and they got all these awards, and then they come here and they take some lumps. And, you know, I think we've just tried to handle it with a little bit of humor, with the idea that we knew it was going to be tough. I think, you know, we won our very first game down at St. Mary's, and after the game, the newspaper reporter was asking me about it, and I said, well, we haven't lost a game for 28 years. Why start now? You know, and it was just tongue-in-cheek, knowing, because we knew we were going to take a lot of lumps. But I think what these kids will take away are the great moments they provided us. They beat Fresno State, the defending national champions, in the first game here at PK Park. They won their very first game down at St. Mary's. They beat Oregon State in front of a Pac-10 record crowd of 16,400 at Civic Stadium in Portland, 3-2 in 10 innings. They beat the #1 draft pick of the New York Yankees, who's pitching for UCLA now. They beat Stanford, a team that was in the College World Series last year. So they've given us more high moments than we could have ever imagined. And I know there's just many, many good things for these kids to come.
That's a great note to end on, Joe, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. I'll be out for a game.
Good. We've enjoyed having you out.
We've been speaking with Joe Giansante, Senior Associate Athletic Director for External Communications in the UO Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.
Go Ducks!